complete change in the investment landscape based on the arrival of inflation, the long overdue point where the dreaded monster rears its ugly head. And this is going to completely change the dynamics that have existed for investors over the last decade. Pretty much everything that worked while the Fed was inflating this bubble is not going to work as the air comes out of it. And the air is going to come out of it, despite whatever efforts the Fed may pursue to prevent that. I think they've already pricked this bubble, and there's really no way to prevent it from deflating. So first of all, to discuss the topic of inflation, the first part of the stagflation equation, clearly we have a huge inflation problem, and we've had this inflation problem for over a decade. It's just that it hasn't manifested itself in a way that was problematic to the Fed or to investors, because the inflation was resulting in asset prices going up rather than consumer prices. I mean, consumer prices went up, but not by an amount that caused an alarm, especially since the government was able to disguise the true degree to which prices were rising with the CPI, which doesn't really do a good job, I think, by design of accurately reflecting what's happening in prices. It substantially understates the degree to which prices are going up. And so given the ability of the government to pretend that we had inflation below 2%, that gave the Fed cover to continue to create more inflation under the guise of quantitative easing and stimulus and 0% interest rates. But that money flowed primarily into financial assets, but it also fueled a record increase in U.S. trade deficits. In fact, this morning, we got news that the December trade deficit was a new record, $101 billion. That is the first month where we've had a trade deficit in excess of $100 billion. This is merchandise trade, goods. And for the entire year, our trade deficit in goods eclipsed $1 trillion.
Before we continue, help us clicking that YouTube like button and subscribe now to our channel. This shows the algorithm that you valued this information, and it helps us spread that message. Sharing is caring. And now
that is an unheard of deficit. Never before has anything that bad been achieved, by any nation. And so part of that actually kept a lid on inflation, even though the way the government measures inflation, we had a 7% increase in consumer prices. Imagine how much more consumer prices would have gone up had $1 trillion worth of stuff not been dumped into our market by our trading partners. And how did we pay for all this stuff? We didn't. We printed money, and we exchanged the money we printed for the goods that that the rest of the world produced. And Americans didn't even earn a lot of the money that they spent. It was just handed to them by the government in the form of stimulus checks or other bailout money. And where did that come from? Well, it came from the Fed's printing press. We did the worst possible combination of monetary and fiscal policy in 2000 when we first entered, the pandemic, March of 2000, because as the economy was shutting down due to COVID and due to government restrictions as a result of COVID, instead of doing the right thing and contracting money supply along with the economy so demand would go down with supply, the government and the Fed conspired for the worst combination of monetary and fiscal policy probably in the history of the United States. As millions of Americans were leaving work, the government mailed everybody checks to replace their paychecks. But the key is when you're earning a paycheck, you're being productive. You're helping to produce goods and services, and then you're rewarded with pay, and now you can consume some of the goods and services that you help produce. But when you're not working, you need to consume less. But the government didn't want that because that would have meant a more severe recession. So the government sent everybody money to buy goods and services that they weren't producing. And the fact that we have big shortages should not have been a surprise. I mean, it's an obvious consequence of a failure to produce. You don't have stuff and you get a shortage. But we had all this extra demand thanks to the government and the Federal Reserve. And we haven't even really begun to feel all the consequences of that inflation. I think the inflation that we've experienced in 2021, a lot of that was largely the delayed consequence of the inflation that was produced prior to 2020. I don't even think we've caught up to that inflation yet, which is one of the reasons that we're going much higher.
I have bad news for you. If you're not rich by now, you're screwed. And if you're in debt, you're even double screwed. How so, you might wonder? Well, the sad truth is that you're working your whole life to make someone else rich. The mega corporations, the banks, the politicians, everyone is getting richer. They get your money. And what is even worse, they get your time, they get your life. You are not even in a rat race. You're in a financial prison. But what could a solution for you look like? Honestly, I don't know, but I know what a solution for me would look like. It's very simple. I use whatever money I have and I multiply it with 1,000. This could make my life much easier and probably yours as well. If you have $1,000 available and multiply this with 1,000, I believe that this could solve some financial issue for the one or the other. Of course, if you're ugly, you would have to multiply it with much more than 1,000. My name is Markus Dahn, and this is what I decided to do. I decided to 1000x my money. This is not a joke. I know what you may be thinking. What is this guy talking about? How should this work? This is not possible. Well, I made a detailed video where I laid out my plan. And some clever folks might even want to look at this plan and copy it and do exactly what I do. This is just a little hint on the side. You have two options. You leave, you forget what you have seen. You do whatever you're doing and you hope that somehow you get some other results. Good luck with that. Or you click the link below the video. You enter your email address because I'm not showing this to everybody. You at least watch my video on how I plan to 1000x my money. The choice is yours. Make the right choice. Join me. See what a different future you could have. See at least how I plan to do the 1000x. So click on the link below, enter your email address, and I see you on the other side. Your Markus Dahn.